Hello everyone and welcome to another Commander video, a little showcase where I talk about my Commander decks and what I think makes them fun and just hopefully get some ideas from you guys and give you guys ideas likewise. To start off, would like to thank a lot of people that were encouraging and gave some nice comments on my last video. I probably would not continue this for very long if I didn't have such a gracious audience, so thank you. And today we're going to jump right in and talk about Amareth the Lustrous and what makes her special. And this video is a reminder for myself as well as for others because this deck can get a little complicated as far as the interactions and remembering certain things and what triggers what. So hopefully this is a good reference for myself as well as others. But let's jump right into it and talk about who is the commander. So, interesting side note first. When I play this deck and introduce it, some people get confused and think I'm talking about an Omnath deck, but Omnath is very different than Amareth, even though they sound the same and sometimes I mispronounce them. But this commander, Amareth the Lustrous, is unlike a lot of commanders, does not have a ton of lore. In fact, the wiki has this small paragraph, which is a little unfortunate, but that's what we have to work with. So I will just read verbatim since it's quite short. And it says, when dragons age on this particular plane, their scales harden over time, turning into beautiful crystal. Amareth has been around for a long time, longer than any other dragon, and she takes immense pride in her glistening scales. So much pride, in fact, that she takes no interest in hoarding boring gold. She exclusively hoards gems and crystals as lustrous as herself. If people stumble upon her lair and make no attempt to take anything for themselves, Amareth will happily spend hours showing them the highlights of her collection. So from that, I did learn that she is a lady dragon, and I was concerned I didn't have any female representation in my commander collection, but alas, that worry is put to rest. Which is kind of funny because a lot of other YouTubers that I've watched review and give their decks on her, they refer to her as a dude. They refer to her as a male, and I don't think it's wise to misgender an ancient dragon, but to each their own. Uh, Interesting point is that it says that she has been around longer than any other dragon. So that could mean one of two things, I think. It could mean any other dragon on that particular plane, like it says, or it could mean all dragons everywhere in existence, which would make her even older than the Dragon himself. So that is quite interesting. And also interesting that it's a really old dragon that only has about 5 lines of text. But, you know, what are you going to do? Regardless, I think the lore does quite well establish that she loves her collection of gems and crystals. And this does tie quite nicely into her rule text, which says she has flying, and then whenever another permanent enters the battlefield, look at the top card of your library, and if it shares a card type with that permanent, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. So, she likes to show off what's in her deck, what's in her collection, and that makes sense. And that also has a nice tie-in to the flavor text, which says, come closer, dear. Let me see that bauble. I've got a match for it somewhere. When there's a match, as in a match of card type, and remember the 7 major card types are creature, planeswalker, enchantment, artifact, land, instant, sorcery. The permanents of those, when a permanent of the same type enters the battlefield, you look at the top card. If it's the same, you may put it in your hand. And that, by the way, may put it in your hand is not considered drawing. So that gets around some cards, like Notion Thief. But also, Amareth is just a 6/6 flying creature. So, you know, you can just use her as a beater, and you can have kind of a Voltron theme if that was your option. So if you can do whatever you'd like with this creature, but I chose to take this commander and use a permanent type kind of theme. which if you look at a lot of other decks on EDH or maybe Tap Out, it seems like they are built around cheap tribal cards, cheap tribal type cards. So card type, usually small creatures. And so the idea is, well, you play a creature, look at the top card, you put another creature in your hand, you play that creature. You kind of quickly cycle through your deck, and that is one way to do it. And I thought, well, that's kind of the idea, so I wanted to do that as well, but I wanted to be unconventional and unique. So I decided to use lands, but not just lands. I wanted to go a step further and go multi-typing. So I have land creatures, and then I'll have enchantment creatures, and then I'll have just things that are multiple types to try to abuse the ability as much as possible. But that's enough of introductions. You know who the commander is, and you know the general theme, which broadly is lands and lands entering the battlefield, sometimes as more than one type to get multiple options for the trigger of Amareth. But let's just give you a nice screenshot of the deck. And I'll also put the deck list in the description so you can see it. So rather than, as before, going through every card and giving a justification for it, I will instead give you a highlight of some combos and synergies, some honorable mentions, and then lastly I will give a few ways you might want to improve the deck or go a different option if you would love to do that. So it is all about the lands, baby. The lands enter the battlefield, and they may trigger numerous abilities to the stack. And I like the idea of turning lands into creatures. So I have Life and Limb, Living Lands, and Nature's Revolts to make people also worried about using board wipes because they would kill their own lands in the process. So that would make them a little hesitant. And then, of course, I can make everything an enchantment with Enchanted Evening. And that's going to come as part of a combo. A few combos later, we'll talk about those. But the general thing here is, with two of those things, is that we want cards that are more than one type. That increases the likelihood we'll put a card in our hand with Amareth. And to help out with our commander, we also here have a few little helpers, I call them. These are guys that let us play with the top card revealed. And these guys are the Lantern of Insight, the Corsair of Kuluflix, and the Oracle of Dul Muldala. And then obviously, if you have out Tamio, Collector of Tales, that would be even better because you can choose a card, which happens to be the top card of your library, and you just put it in your hand right away. And also tokens. Tokens are permanents, so they would also trigger Amareth. So we have a lot of token generators. Like Amaria's Angel, Field of the Dead, Smothering Tithe, and Feldar's Retreat. So that's the general idea. We put as many things out and as many types out as we can, but obviously we were focusing on lands. That's the general idea. The specific win con is focused on infinite landfall. And using infinite landfall, we can have infinite triggers of mill, damage, token, life gain, and my personal favorite, we can eventually destroy everyone else's lands. Because sometimes I am an absolute madman. And actually, I don't mind if my lands die, because I can return my lands from the graveyard. I've got the Crucible of Worlds and the Rumanap Excavator. So, Crucible of Worlds, Cow? The cow? Yeah, that's pretty good. So here's an example, a picture from a recent game, to just give you an idea of what the deck could do. I mean, I've done this once, that's why I took a picture of it. In the picture here, we have all lands are forest, and then all forests are 1/1 saplings, and then all permanents are enchantments, and then all enchantments are creatures equal to their power toughness, equal to their mana value. And so in this instance, all lands are destroyed, all tokens are destroyed, except my own, because I was first able to play Unbreakable Formation on my main phase. So I will break all that down, what happened in our next section. And that is our combos and our synergies. How does this all work together, and how do we get that infinite landfall? And so the infinite landfall that we are talking about here, or the main way we're going to win, we can do by 3 options. The first of which here is Retreat to Coral Home, plus Sakura Tribe Scout, plus any of the bounce lands, for example this Selesnya Sanctuary. And that's going to work where we have the first 2 in play, tap the Scout and put down the Sanctuary, and then using its own trigger we can return itself, and then that still triggered Coral Helm to untap the Scout, so we can do it all over again. So that's one option. The only downside is that does require the bounce lands. You need to have that in your hands at the time you can do this, so that's a little restrictive. The second option I think is a little more flexible, although it does require 3 pieces. That is the Lotus Cobra, plus Retreat to Coral Helm, plus the Ruin Ghost. And so this works where we have a white source to produce white, and then we'll use the Ghost ability to flicker a land, and then that land comes back and then triggers the Cobra and Coral Helm. The Cobra will produce a white, and then Coral Helm will untap the Ghost, and then using that white will repeat over and over. So these 2 make an engine, and we can use that to win the game. By mill, for example, if you had the Ruin Crab out, that is one option to win right away. You could also win by damage with Blasting Station, and if you had token generators like Scroot Swarm, Emiria's Angel, or Field of the Dead, you would create a token and then sack the token immediately to deal damage, and then let the new token enter the battlefield. You could do that. You could have the Tyrant of the Guidery Straits, and that'll let you draw your library, and then you could do all kind of things. You could also have Simic Ascendancy and Feldar's Retreat, because that'll let you put counters and everything as a new land enters the battlefield, and you'll win on your next upkeep with that. And then, of course, Evolution Sage right there just speeds things up. And then there is a third option for Landfall, which is actually infinite lands, and that is Spore Mound plus Life and Limb. Life and Limb says that all forests are saplings and all saplings are forests. And Spore Mound says that whenever a land enters the battlefield, you create a sapling, and that sapling is going to be a land itself in this case, so it will trigger for itself infinitely. So if you actually didn't have a way to remove either piece here instantly, the game would end in a tie. It would never end. So you either need a win condition, like the crab, or damage or something, or you need to have a way to kill Spore Mound instantly, like Blasting Station, or if you had like Beast Within or Greater Good. Those are options I have. So those are 3 options for infinite landfall, and that is going to be big for winning the game. And then we have a few other things you could do with the deck, such as what I showed in the beginning here. Enchanted Evening and Opalescence. That is a big nuke, because Enchanted Evening makes everything an enchantment, and Opalescence says every other enchantment is now an enchantment creature with power toughness equal to its mana value. Well, guess what? Lands and tokens, they have no mana value, so they are therefore immediately destroyed as a state-based action of having 0 toughness. That is a pretty mean thing to do, but then again, it's extremely fair. I mean, your lands are being destroyed too, except if your lands were creatures first and you had put counters on them, like with Feldar's Retreat or Cathar's Crusade, they would be saved because they are modified beyond that base value of 0 toughness. And so you could do that also with Unbreakable Formation, as I demonstrated. And if you wanted to tweak this a little bit, you could throw in the Aura Thief. So Enchanted Evening plus Aura Thief equals Steal Everything. Because when the Aura Thief dies, he says that you gain control of all enchantments. And when everything is an enchantment, you gain control of all lands, all permanents, all planeswalkers even. So that is really good. Your opponents probably are not going to board wipe, and they're probably not going to kill him in combat, so that gives you free damage and free protection from things like that. But to kill the Aura Thief yourself, you will need an instant way to do that. Greater Good, Beast Within, or you could actually use Aura Mutation when everything is an enchantment, because that would be an enchantment. It's kind of funny, actually. Aura Thief has official rule text that seems to dissuade you from using it, because it says, oh, well, there's not actually much that would change when you gain control of an enchantment. It's not that interesting, but I would think that Wizards knows this combo exists. So, anyway. And then next we have Opposition plus the Winter Orb. Winter Orb says that you can only untap, each player can only untap one land per turn if this is untapped. And then we can use Opposition to tap it on our last opponent's instep. So that way it will be tapped at the beginning of our untap step. You could also get around this if you had Seaborn Muse. But Seaborn Muse is a creature and a little easier to kill. And so this is going to be just another way to outpace our opponents and slow them down. Another way you can destroy all lands, except your own, and actually a much easier way, I think, is if you had the Yagamaya's Cradle of Growth, and that makes everything a forest, plus living lands, plus Elish Norn. So that makes all lands now a creature, a 1/1 creature, and Elish Norn debuffs your opponent's creatures by -2 and buffs your own by +2. So that would kill all lands except your own. And that is pretty mean, and you might lose some friends over this, but you might want to remind your friends that they could tap out and float mana in order to respond later in the turn. And then we have the Knight of the Reliquary plus Retreat to Coralhelm plus Yavamaya's Cradle of Growth. And so the Knight says that you can tap to sacrifice a forest or plains and search for any land, a land. That's pretty good right away. But then if we have the Cradle of Growth, all lands are forests, so we can continue to do this forever, because when that new land enters the battlefield, we can untap it with Retreat to Coralhelm. This is even better if we have out Titania, because we're sacrificing lands, so we're also making elementals. So that is going to give us quite a lot of tokens. This is not infinite, but it does cycle through your entire library to put all your lands on the battlefield, all your powerful non-basics. So that's good. And then the last combo is the Omen Machine plus the Azorius Renegade Lavinia. And Lavinia says that all free spells are countered, and the Omen Machine says players can't draw cards, but they do get a free spell from the top of their library at the beginning of their turn, which would be immediately countered. So that is a good way just to control the board generally. This doesn't even need to be in a land deck. You can put it in any deck, really. But the kind of thing that I have it in this deck because it says you can't draw cards, well, we can get around that because remember our commander says that we put a card in our hand when we play a permanent of the same type from our library. So we can get around that automatically by doing that. And that's all the major combos in the deck. You could probably make a lot more by tweaking this, but those are the ones I included. And then here are some honorable mentions. These are cards that I think are fun and I just want to show off and talk about. The first of which here is the Parallax Wave. Parallax Wave seems like an odd way to remove things because they do come back eventually when it's destroyed or it loses the last fading counter. But I have it in this deck because you can remove your own creatures and that will save them from a board wipe, for example. And then on your next turn, you remove that last counter and they come back, which would trigger Easy Bees again. So that is one way you can save them. And then Glacial Chasm. Glacial Chasm seems like a questionable card when you first read it, because it has a cumulative upkeep of 2 life, and then you have to sacrifice the land as it enters the battlefield, and then you can't attack, and this doesn't produce any mana, so it seems kind of bad. But it does prevent all damage, whether combat or non-combat. And then the thing why it's good in a land deck, I think, is because remember we have the Ruined Ghost, so we can just continuously flicker this land, and that way we can just negate the upkeep costs from that. Or if you want, just let it be sacrificed. Don't pay the cost. It'll go to the graveyard, and we can play it again with Crucible Worlds or the Excavator. You could even search for this instantly with the Knight of the Reliquary, and just in response to damage, just don't take the damage. So you could do that as well. And then Mana Breach is my newest card I've added, and that's a fun card because It controls the board and makes your opponents really have a double think about whether they want to do something. Because especially with like storm decks that cast a lot of spells in a row, because eventually they won't be able to do that because they'll have no lands. And it's good for us because we can put lands back in our hand to play again, and that is good for more landfall triggers. And at $2, this is a beautiful art by Rebecca Gayu, so I would include it just for that. And then finally, we have some possible upgrades, possible different ways you can do this. And the first one here, the Royal Elemental. I don't have this deck in the deck because it is very heavy blue, but it does let you gain control of everything. If you wish to steal, that'd be a more steel theme, you could do that. And then Kamada of the East Tree, he also is expensive mana, and then I think he is good because he synergizes with the commander. He's more about that ETB, and you kind of get a 2-for-1 with it. Tatiova is basically the same thing as the Tyrant of the Gyri Straits, but it's cheaper mana and cheaper dollar. Only $1 versus about $8. So you could actually include both if you wanted to do that. Or if you were more budgeted, you could include Tatiova over the Tyrant. And then Nissa, who shakes the world. She is pretty fun because you can really do more of the land creatures. But I don't have her anymore because her ultimate is really not that effective when you don't have as many basic lands, because it only triggers for forest. So having that double green, though, is kind of overkill, I thought. But you could definitely include her if you wanted. And yeah, that is the deck. And so if you guys have any other comments, any other concerns or ideas, I'd love to hear them. Thank you again for everyone that was supportive last time. And definitely appreciate you guys. I'll continue to make these as long as there's an interest, and seems like there is. And I just love making Magic and Magic videos and just talking about it, sharing information with new players. So if you want to subscribe and get more information, you can do that. If you would love what you see or you have different feedback, please share. But that's all I got for today, guys. I'll hopefully see you guys in the next video. So have a good weekend or a good week, whatever may be the case. See you around.